I thought I'd make a video about my time with Zealous Racing League, where I made highlight videos for them in Assetto Corsa Competizione. I was running an F1 league, but found it difficult to keep setting up full seasons because my health wasn't good. I needed to rest a lot of the time, so I had largely stopped planning races. I've been making videos of the races which had to be recorded live, and met Keg in that league. He mentioned the idea of me doing videos of replays in Zealous Racing League, which would be a convenient way for me to stay involved in the SimRacing League scene without having to commit to live races. I felt like me and Keg agreed on sportsmanship being an important factor in sim racing. I joined as they were starting Season 2, so I did highlights of each race for that season. I wanted to keep the intro short so that you didn't lose audience attention right at the start, but also wanted to keep the intro in the video because it helps adjust the viewer to the volume level without suddenly blasting them with noise, and the intro can help set up that sense of immersion for the video, rather than throwing the audience right in. The first recap video was Season 1, which made sense to produce because there were no videos of the races from that season. Season 2, as I mentioned, had videos from each race, so it wasn't necessary for a recap video for Season 2, but it was still nice to condense that season into one video, so I did end up making a Season 2 recap. Season 3 had some live videos, and I wasn't involved in the production of the streams, so at this point I didn't really need to step in to help make content. But still, it was nice to make that third recap video to tell the story of the season, and make a playlist out of those first seasons which capture the passion of the league. I felt that it was a good idea to save the history of the league itself, in case people would be interested in future, so I made a little history video. And I think that may have been important because there doesn't seem to have been much documentation about early sim racing leagues, which is a shame because it's interesting seeing the development of sim racing. Formula Sim Racing were one of the only leagues I noticed making edited videos in the early days. I didn't feel like I was good at hosting interviews, but it seemed like a fun idea, and being bad at something might be a good excuse to try and get better at it. I don't know if I improved, but I'm glad I tried it. Unfortunately, I didn't find any software that could capture both my microphone and the other person's voice in separate channels in sync, so I think I just used their voice each time. It was nice to do a race video and then add some ancillary content like an interview before the next race video. People seem to enjoy not having name tags in videos, which I assume was to protect a sense of immersion, but I used them because it helped show you which driver was which at a glance. But the name tags stopped working for me at some point. They'd be very faint when toggled on, so I turned them off and just tried to work hard at conveying which driver was which. You see certain driving styles when you watch the races. For example, in Season 2, I was watching Jones because I was trying to get a dramatic screenshot of him, and noticed that he never hit the high curb, so he had this consistently careful driving style. I think due to the difficult conditions of having rain during a night race, there were so many incidents on round 12 that at 43 minutes long, the recordings for that highlight video were almost as long as the race itself. There were lots of things that went wrong. Fraps recordings didn't work, and Shadowplay didn't even record when set to include desktop mode for ACC. OBS did work in MP4, but it would often just capture the audio while the video got jammed and would need a program restart. Then suddenly OBS set itself to export in MKV files, which didn't work in my video editor. So after recording each clip from a replay file, I had to check to see if the video got jammed and if it was still exporting as MP4. For the files that exported in MKV, I could convert them into MP4 using Handbrake, but even that would stop exporting to MP4 unless you restarted it after doing each individual clip, and you'd lose some quality unless you have the patience to put the settings high and wait for each one to convert properly. I lost sound early on, and it sounded like I could hear mouse clicks in the video, so I had to check the clips to make sure that the audio was right. It can be fun when everything's working, but when you've got to keep redoing the same clip over and over again because there was some issue, it can feel tedious. Recording the scenes could be awkward because the replay system didn't have a control guide, so I pressed every button and wrote down what happened to make a guide myself, and published that on Steam. The free roam camera was practically a hidden option, which you'd use to get a particular trackside view, but it inherited the degree of rotation from the car you were following, so you'd move the replay point until the car you were following was driving straight so that it had no rotation, and then switch into the free roam camera. So then you'd find the point in the replay which you'd want to record, and you position the camera to where you wanted it, and then set the field of view to zoom in. But if you forgot to disable the follow car option at this point, then you'd have to set it up all over again, because disabling the follow option would frustratingly reset the camera. What made this confusing was that I think you had to disable the follow car option just to get into the free roam view. I can't remember why this kept being an issue. A lot of the time I just relied on the default camera. The key point was that if you wanted to set the free roam camera somewhere alongside the track, you didn't want it to move, but the follow car option being left on meant that the camera would share the motion of the car, which was useful if you wanted to stick the camera to the hood or side of the car, but meant setting up the camera all over again if you accidentally left it on while trying to do a static camera. It was not a user-friendly program. The replay controls would disappear or sometimes just not respond. If there were 20 cars doing 15 laps around 10 corners across 15 races over 10 seasons, then there was about 500,000 cars that went round a corner. The trick was to follow the top 3 cars in each race and look at their replay timeline to see if any of their laps were longer than usual, which hinted at either a pit stop or a dramatic incident. If their grid position changed by the end, then you'd skim through to see where their position changed to look for an overtake. There was a trick to writing the script, because you'd have an incident that was a certain number of seconds in length, such as a car spinning on a curb and then being hit by another car, and you'd wanted to commentate on it without dead air, so you wrote the script with a budget of however many seconds that you needed to keep talking, sometimes to fill a long incident, and sometimes to quickly convey a chain of events. A replay recorded from a second angle helped give you more time if needed. For the Season 3 recap, I edited a video of each track and then put all the videos together in a new project, which I imagine lost a bit of quality, but that was a tidy way to make the video. It's certainly easier to move the content around the edited timeline if large parts of it are in complete chunks. I was hesitant to make a crashes video because you run the risk of making the league look chaotic, but ultimately I felt like it was worth finally making a video like that for Season 3. The recordings for the Season 3 incidents didn't have impact sound effects, so I added those in the editor. I've put some of the outtakes in the background of this video, which are either minor incidents, or they were dramatic ones from an angle that I didn't use for the final edit of the video. It's worth noting that a lot of the spins I think were due to the cars having picked up some suspension damage, which I assume would have taken a long time to fix if they went in for a pit stop. Zealous Racing League did attract a lot of good drivers, with many of them having competed in motorsport. For the music I wanted something that wasn't aggressively copyrighted, because that could cause a video to not play any audio at all. I think the early Need for Speed soundtrack was a good fit for the videos. I had a lot of stats after going through the results for each video, and knew how to throw graphs together, so I made a stats video, which I think was a good way to visualise the league's history, but it would have taken a long time to research and put something like that together if you didn't already have the pieces ready. In some particular mishaps, I once accidentally wrote Tim Shade's name in the script as Timeshad, so I'm glad I wasn't doing live commentary. My microphone stopped working just before voicing a script for one of the biggest races, which I think had 28 cars doing 37 laps in bad conditions, leading to a lot of highlights, so that one especially took a while. There was the odd glitch in the game, but they rarely seemed to impact the races. One of the funniest moments was when I posted a screenshot to the subreddit about how the Bowers had raced in different teams, and someone commented, "And it's a simulator, not real life, who cares?" I do wonder why people make these kind of comments. Among technical issues, you only see the pit crew and hear impact sounds for the car belonging to the player that recorded the demo, so I think it was Portis that had supplied the demos. Unfortunately, we didn't get a replay of the first race of Season 1. We had to figure out how to share the replay files, because they were quite large, so I think we used Google for that. Obviously the league was made for racing, not YouTube videos, so it made sense that the demos had not been a priority. I think the liveries were sometimes different in the replays compared to what was used during the race, which I don't recall realising early on, otherwise I might have tried to figure out how to get them to match up. The Quantico font used in ZRL branding didn't want to work in the video editor, so I think I used GIMP to create some of the video thumbnails, rather than the Vegas video editor. I had hardware trouble as an electric grill failed, which seems to have been related to a power surge that took out my cable modem and power line units. So I lost internet connection for a few days, and every time I wanted to cook food I then had to use my fan oven, which took longer than the grill, leaving me less time to edit the videos. That might not sound like a significant issue, but if you're trying to keep up with editing videos of races that are being held each week, you can't afford any delays, otherwise you end up behind, and then you have to decide whether you cut corners to catch up, or just have to publish every video much later than when the race happened. A heatwave came on, which was bad news because my graphics card was already stressed running ACC on high settings. I've got an air conditioner, but it's noisy, so I'd have to turn it off while doing commentary. It might not sound like much of an issue, but if you're spending all day going through the replay looking for highlights, and trying to get decent recordings from it as you're going along while taking script notes, then over time it can heat the room up, and you're even hotter trying to do script takes with the air conditioner off. You couldn't even leave the window open, because here in London it's so noisy that you'd want to try and reduce noise from the outside. Sorting out the standings took time, because you need the results of each race after any penalties have been applied. Then you've got to add them up to the previous results and do the same for the team standings. Even if you automated as much of that process as you could, it still takes time to sort out. My web browser used to jam while loading the race results on Google Docs, and we put a lot of energy into making sure the points were correct. It can take a long time to go over the 20 driver results across 20 tracks, which is obviously 400 data points per season. At one point there was confusion over a particular flag, and I wanted to make sure whether it was for Austria or Latvia. The early results didn't have any flags, so that took a while to sort out. Among personal issues that made it difficult to stay on schedule each week, my health wasn't great, so I could end up too tired. I sounded rough, and so I had to decide whether to delay the commentary recording or not to a time when I might sound better. As it turned out, there were very few moments that I could do recording uninterrupted, partly because there was constant hammering going on with some construction work nearby. It could take a long time to demolish a building and build a new house, and I live in London, so it's always noisy. What would generally happen is that I'd shelve every other thing in my life to grind on getting a video completed, and then I'd go back to sorting everything else out, and then I'd clear some things to work on a video again. But often when I got around to trying to record a race, I'd find that there was a big update for the game, so I'd have to wait for that to download, which could take a long time because my internet goes through Powerline, and I share the connection, so my download speed is a fraction of what it should be. So for all those reasons mentioned, I was getting so behind that by the time I'd done a third season highlight video, the league had raced for 10 seasons, and that was even after I'd stopped doing videos for individual races. A typical video might take 7 hours of recording a replay in game and 8 hours in the video editor, but it could be more depending on the project. The recap videos were much longer if I remember correctly. I had made some notes that I worked on the GT3 Season 2 recap video from September 2021 to August 2022, so I think with a lot of interruptions, that took about a year. I had around 149 hours played in ACC when I started recording for the Season 3 recap video, and ended up at 172 hours when I finished, so I guess it took me about 23 hours just to record that one. So it was practically impossible to keep up with the level of detail I wanted to add, and I didn't want to cut corners. As I said, I had been shelving a lot of other projects, so it made sense to turn back to the other things. I remember now that one of the biggest reasons I had for focusing on other projects instead of ZRL was that I didn't feel like I could work on a big project. To make a recap video, I had everything in my mind that I wanted to do with it, in terms of telling the story of the races, but it took time to build up that image in my mind. If I was interrupted for a few days, then I'd have to start the entire thing again, as I'd lose it all in my short-term memory, and that would threaten my long-term motivation to work on the videos. I would have to find all the recordings again, find all the points in the storyline, maybe do some recording and rewrite the script if it wasn't finished. I was afraid that it could have taken dozens of hours of reworking the entire thing, and there was a long period of time where I wasn't sure if I needed to stay in hospital, and that would have interrupted a big project like that, so I was just working on little things for a long time. Looking back, I probably could have done more videos, but I was worried that it would crush my motivation if I was faced with restarting a project. So I'd say that the reason I stopped making the videos was because of a combination of all these things, and that feeling of wanting to finish other projects. I was starting to do a lot of writing about gaming history around this time, particularly about Gary's Mod. So after some last videos in 2023, I let the other staff members know that I wanted to stop, and they expressed appreciation for the work I'd done, and I was happy that the races were being live streamed. Formula SimRacing had inspired the kind of video editing I was doing, and for a while they had stopped doing videos that way, similarly because it was so difficult. With the way the YouTube search and recommended videos lists work, it seems to favour monetized videos, which don't tend to have much editing, because if you're trying to make money from getting clicks, then you don't need to edit the video, you just need to make a clickbait thumbnail and title, and obviously we didn't do that. So you see SimRacing videos that get a lot of views, but don't have much editing, and the racing that I saw was pretty bad. It's a shame that it works that way, but I knew that the ZRL audience was primarily going to be the drivers, and that's all that really mattered. If I could keep up with everything, I think I'd still do it because the motivation is there. Keg had stepped back, but all of the staff were as passionate about sim racing as he was, so it was a good environment. It was fun knowing that the drivers were watching the videos, although I felt guilty that I was listed as a content creator, but was so slow at creating content. If I'd have kept going, I would have wanted to make videos on subjects like the top 10 drives, for things like winning from the furthest back on the grid, or winning by the biggest margin. I love montages, but they took a lot of time. I'm not sure if you needed to pay for the DLC to run the replays on the extra tracks, but I think I bought the game just for making the videos, so I would have got the DLC if needed. I logged 174 hours in the game, and I don't recall ever joining an online race, so I think it was almost entirely those 174 hours were recording. I think the ultimate idea would have been to join as a driver, but I wouldn't want to take a spot if I might only show up for a couple of races in a season, because I needed to sleep a lot of the time. I had some experience with R-Factor and Race 07 with a Logitech driving force, and had been consistent in F1 races, later using a Thrustmaster T300. I think I'd have fit somewhere into the pack, probably alongside Keg, because I used to go wheel to wheel with him. He still holds a record in the league that I put together. I'm glad that he invited me to work on ZRL. The last thing I did was to make an archive of the league, primarily to make sure that the results from those early seasons were saved. I did that by making a Steam group and calling it the ZRL archive, where the discussion posts are used like Wikipedia articles. So that was my journey in video editing and commentary with Zealous Racing League, and I got good feedback as I went along, with people saying that they wanted the commentary to be more energetic, and I was glad that people wanted that energy, because I grew up in an environment where I didn't feel like I could show emotion, so it was good to open up and share that passion for sim racing.